Hey folks, Mac T, and I have the cam phasers, the exhaust and intake phasers of the TI-VCT 3.5 Duratec engine. That is twin independent variable cam timing, and it does have two VCTs and or phasers rather, and VCT combination. So each VCT controls a cam phaser. There's two exhaust and two intake phasers, and they do have a function. But I wanted to check out, since we had the water pump failure, what kind of metal might have gotten into the phasers. Because we saw the VCTs had a ton of metal on them, and I'll do a video on that here after this one probably, but I'll want to say that, yeah, there's a lot of metal on those VCTs, so my question was, did they get into the phasers? Let's check out the wear, let's tear them apart and dissect them, and I'll explain how they work, because some of you probably have no clue. So in a very simple layman's terms, I will explain how these VCTs work, and the phasers and everything rather, how they work and how they adjust the timing, and also the wear. Let's check the wear. So let's tear them apart. Now, first things first, if you're looking at the engine on the back bank against the firewall, this is your exhaust phaser and this is your intake phaser, and we're going to go ahead and tear them apart, but you can see how they're different, and they are physically different with some parts on the inside. So we'll go ahead and tear them apart and check out how they're made and what they do, and I'll explain all the holes and the chains and everything else. And the first thing you got to note is that the timing color mark right here is on the dot, as with this one is of course lined up on the L, but you know, that's not quite how it all goes on there, but that's how I got it set up for this video. But you take this chain off and you inspect it, and as you can see, there is not too much play in it. It's not too worn out. If you look at that, not much at all. Anyway, we'll go ahead and take this apart, and we'll start out with the intake. Don't worry about it as far as the intake goes. Not going to be many things flying around. Yes, we're not going to have things flying around, but I will show you how to take it apart without much fuss. So let's go ahead and do that. Now we're going to take this apart. This works the same way for all the VCT or the phasers. So you just take it and do this right here. And I already did the intake one, so we're just doing the exhaust. By putting it on the vise here, that just gives you the ability to crank down on it and bust it free, hopefully, without much fuss. There we go. Do the other one. That's all it takes. And of course, I did the same one. I just put it in here, got it down in there, tighten it up and loosen them. So they're both loose now. So let's take them over to the workbench and take them apart. Now, of course, we have the chain right here. So let's go ahead and we'll start out with the intake cam phaser. And this one's not too terribly bad to deal with. I'm going to go ahead and get all these bolts out of here. And you can see it sort of floats a little bit. Does have a little bit of a float to it. You see that, a little bit of springiness to it, and the reason why is because of this spring right here, that spring that fits right in there. Now there's a funny thing that's in there. Let me pull this out. if I can. Nope, I'm going to have to take it out the other way. But this spring has a purpose. And that's all I can say right now. Now this here, as you can see, doesn't move. That's because this little plunger right in here is stuck there, and I'll explain why later. So in order to get this to turn, it's locked in. This is how the phaser is locked in when you start up your 3.5 Duratec with the twin independent, cams. It's locked into this position purposefully as designed, and that's the purpose behind it all. And here we have these little vanes here that you can see. I don't know if you can see that. That little piece right there, that comes out, and that's got a little flat spring in it, and they're all over the corners here. And they help seal the oil to keep the tolerances tight so that that can move. But right now, let me see if I can pop that out. There we go. This little plunger here was keeping this from moving. Okay, so now that this is gone, look what happens. Now it can move. What it does is it seats itself right in there. See that hole? It fits right in there, into that little hole, and locks itself in, and doesn't allow it to move. But now that we have this removed, it can move back and forth. So on startup, it locks itself into a set timing cycle for when you start a cold start. And once the oil is allowed to build pressure, and then the PCM controls the VCTs, it then moves it according to load. And I think it's about 10 degrees that it does move. But as far as wear goes, I'm not seeing hardly any wear on this at all. All the surfaces are, you can still see the cross hatches on them and everything else. But we'll pull this ring off of here, and you'll see all these little pieces, all these little guides that I was telling you about that are falling out. We have these little springs right here that are right in here. They're all there, and we just don't see much wear on any part of this. I could probably clean this off just a little bit with some cleaner, but yeah, there's not any wear that is noted on this. And then this just pops right on out like that, and this is all one unit right here, one piece. And we can look at this. I'm going to spray clean this. Hold on. Now I don't know if you can see how this is worn. We do see how it has got some wear, but there's nothing that is popping out as far as above normal wear for a 330,000 mile cam phaser. A little bit of discoloration there. Inside, very smooth and machined. And outside, we do have, I don't know if you guys can see that as I turn it, you can see the chain marks on the gears. So the chains were running in through here, but they're smooth. You can see marks, and right there I pulled off a little piece of metal. So there is some wear on these, but not enough that this pick is even catching. Right there I get a little catch. So, as far as being completely worn out, this gear is not worn out. It could probably service for a lot longer. This is a marking pin right here that holds it in place, and that's about it. That's how it looks when you tear it apart. And then this part here, this is the cam phaser that moves back and forth, and that pin goes in there. And these sliders that I had, these pins here fit in here, and they help wash the fluid through as it's going through with then they stick out essentially to help maintain the actual seal inside the actual cylinder. So that's how it is. You got your oil flows, and I'll explain these all later and what these markings are. Let's go ahead and do the exhaust. Now you notice this one also has a little jiggly to it, and it has a spring pretty much the same. Get these bolts put over here. We can see that we have some oil gathered up in certain areas that is a little bit of a little metal color there, to be expected for 330,000 miles. So let me clean this up and check its wear out. Alright, now you can see the wear that was going through it. Got a few spots here where it's touching, and that's pretty much it. But again, there's nothing there that would indicate that it's nothing more than light touching and going over on a machine surface. So that's pretty much where that's at. You can see on here, right where this little plunger was hitting. Right there. Yep. So we got that for the spring. And the spring here is the same. That's why it was bouncing. And then there we go. And we got the little plunger back out now. So that goes with that spring. Now this one here, the exhaust, has a little bit different. It is spring loaded, but these springs are not that terribly bad. And if you go to this one end with a pick, you can get them to pop out, and there's 4 of them all together. And they have these little pieces like this that hold the spring and help it seat in so it doesn't move. So it seats right in there, and that's about it for there. There's a little seat for the spring inside on both ends, along with this little keeper here. Now I'm not seeing a lot of metal on here, although here you go. You got some metal right there. It's very pulverized and fine. Now could that be from the water pump failure? Yeah, it very well could be. The small stuff is going to get in there. And again, we got some more tiny bits of metal that you can see right here, if you can get it to focus. Look at that. Okay, so we do have a little bit of a fine metal that is going through, and that's probably the metal that they're seeing in the oil testing results. So now we just pop this off and we drop this out, and again this one will have all these little keepers on it, all these little pins that ride in there. I think I got them all out. Nope, got one in there yet. There we go. These are all nice and oily, full of oil. So let's go ahead and clean these up so we can take and inspect them for wear. Now that I got them all cleaned up, we can inspect this and see that this ring here that contains the cam or the phaser timing doesn't really have very much wear on it. You can see in the spots here where it's got a little bit of wear right where it was running the most, going back and forth, but nothing too dramatic. This part here, not too much. Again, no real wear that we can note with the fingernail, so it's very fine wear. And again, we don't see too much wear here. Just a notice of it, but not enough that I can tell with my fingernail. So it was pretty well lubricated and was running pretty optimally. All I can say is these cam phasers were in operation. There was nothing to really worry about on them, and they probably would have went another 100-200,000 miles easily before any failures. But the springs, the little springs here, none of them were broke. None of these little tiny springs were broken. They're all bending and in good shape. So overall, these cam phasers are in good shape, and they're remarkably similar to the other two that I have already tore apart. So this is the parts. Now let's go into how they work. Now, just for clarity, these are the VCTs, and these receive a signal from the PCM to adjust the timing. So these have valves. I'll explain these in another video, but these are what control these cam phasers, because they have no control of their own. So the VCTs, these are the ones that you see sticking out of your valve cover, and they're about like this, sticking out of the valve cover, and they got the little seals around them that usually have some oil seepage. A lot of people complain about, but these are what controls the valve movement of the cam phasers. Now this is the exhaust cam phaser, and really when you put this together, you want to make sure you have this on the top side and coincides with this mark. So when you put it back together, you want this hole here, this indentation, to line up with this. It's very important. So you slide that back in there, and then you can then put this back in there. Now it stays in there, and then you can pop her back out, but you want it to line up in there so that that hole lines up. Now this here hole back here, this little one that's right here, you want it to line up with this timing nub right here. So you slide that in there so it seats in on top of that, so it's in here like this. Now all these little pins here will slide in here along with these little springs that slide in here, and they will then keep pressure on here to keep the leak from happening and keeping oil from coming out. I'm not going to mess with it right now, but as you can see, all these cam phasers, especially this exhaust one, is locked in. Now the amazing thing about this is that when you go ahead and put this spring, and generally you would put this keeper right here in and then just slide this in like so, then that spring will seat in there like it's supposed to, and then that, believe it or not, makes it harder to turn. And I'm going to put all four in here because I couldn't do it with my finger like this, but you can see where it goes. Now when it's in the off position, it requires pressure to keep this for the exhaust to advance that timing on here, and it naturally through the springs snaps back, and then this plunger locks into place, and so when you have startup, it's not moving until pressure is applied, and then once pressure is applied, then this gets plunged out, and then the cam can actually move with some pressure to it and actually adjust itself. So that's pretty much it in a nutshell. And what it does is it uses oil pressure that goes through this hole right here and through this hole right here. Now the oil pressure comes in, it fills up the void behind this like so, and then it causes the actual cams through this hole. Let me see if I can show it to you. Get my finger in here. But there's a hole right in there, and you can actually see it. See the little hole? It's right there, and there's another one right there. That forces the oil into those spaces, and it makes them open up. And when the oil pressure goes down, they close back down with the assistance of the springs. So that's how the VCTs open their valves, and allow the oil pressure to go in based on how the position of the valve is. So if that exhaust VCT says, hey, we need more advance or whatever, retarding, it will send an adjustable pressure through a valve that opens up to adjust it, and then it causes this to then spring and move while it's and it's an on-the-fly thing. So that's how that adjusts it. Now it's pretty much the same thing for the intake, except the intake don't have the springs. So again, with the intake, if I get this lined up right, have to make sure I get it all lined up right so it can move back and forth. There we go. So again, the plunger is right here, and that locks in when there's no oil pressure. But this does it automatically when it shuts down or does a startup. This has no springs in it to assist, but it operates on the same principle because the intake is used far more than the exhaust. The exhaust they tend to leave locked in, and maybe it's open, got the valves for the exhaust open slightly to make easier starts. That's my theory. Whereas the intake is adjustable as far as it goes, but it does lock in when there's no oil pressure. It's supposed to lock back down, and because it puts the oil pressure in here, locks it down for when it goes into a startup mode. They're both supposed to be locked in using these plungers when they start. So this one's locked in at a set cam cycle, and this one's locked in at a set cams cycle. And then again, the oil pressure comes through these little holes right here. Let's show you what the holes are. These holes right here, it comes in through here, and it adjusts the pressure to turn it. And these oil holes right here, all four of them, adjust the pressures going through. This here is the alignment notch on the cam. So you have to, you can imagine both of these have them as far as the cams go. Get this one here. Let's see if I can tear it apart. As you can see, they both have oil holes, but the exhaust only has 2, whereas the intake has 4. So that's the difference between those as far as how they're going to actually function and work in what they're going to do. But that, folks, in a nutshell, is how these really do work, and how they can help make your Duratec 3.5 NA run really smooth and, you know, operate to the best of its ability at low end torque and high end torque. That's why these cams are adjusting to give you the best power all the way through the curve. Hey folks, MacT, and I hope the cam phaser questions were answered in a little bit. I'm not trying to educate you guys on all the nitty-gritty on these things, just give you a roundabout idea how they function, and of course show you that these came off of Lulubell. And Lulubell, my 2011 Ford Edge 3.5 front wheel drive limited, did turn out very well. These had a little bit of micro metal that was in them, but the wear patterns were very, very good. There's no ridges or anything. So the machine surfaces showed wear, but minute wear. And for 330,000 miles, that is acceptable. Those cam phasers were functioning appropriately when we took them out. But we took them out because they had 330,000 miles on them, and basically we're being conservative. We figured if we're going to rebuild the whole front end of the engine, might as well put new cam phasers on it too and head it towards a 500,000 mile edge. So that's what we did. We put it all together with all new front end components on the engine, and she's got new cam phasers, exhaust and intake, VCTs, everything that goes with it. So hey, oil changes pay off, folks. I think that is quite obvious when you look at the wear on those and the fact that they were functioning perfectly. There's no issues with it. So hopefully you learned something from it. and understand how your cam phasers work, see the breakdown and oiling and everything else that functions in that aspect. So it's not magic, it's just oil pressure. That's all it is. Oil pressure that adjusts the timing. And like I said, I think it's like 10 degrees or something. I could be wrong. It might be more, it might be less, but that is what I'm assuming it is from my reading. So anyway, if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. I'll admit it right now. But either way, I hope you enjoyed it. And of course, my feet hit the floor today. I'm having a great day, and I want you to have a great day too. Band of One always has some great music. Mercy Girl has a couple of one-liners for you. And stand by for the VCT checks. And I'll give you a short little glimpse at the end of this video of what we're looking at.